All right, so we've started recording. Excuse me. Yeah, Byron, please share a little bit of your background and kind of how you got into real estate, and then also I'm kind of curious how you became the division president down there in Atlanta, because that's a prestigious role. So
Absolutely. So basically, I moved, and I'll go through the slides. I moved down to Metro Atlanta back in 2008. Got really involved in real estate back in 2009. Started working with Reed Construction Data, which is a construction data information publisher, pretty much the largest publisher in the country. And from there, cold calling was our thing. So on the phones every single day, cold calling. So once I heard of Easy Street Realty, I was like, wow, this is music to my ears because I'm used to being on the phone. So literally being with Easy Street since 2012, having a close relationship with the previous broker and learning a lot from the previous broker. And when she decided to leave in 2016, I kind of took over. And it's just because I was very persistent. I believe in my market at that time, I'd sold the most Easy Street deals of everybody in the Atlanta market. People person, I always like to, lend a helping hand to agents that are trying to build their business, build their database. And from there, I believe our first year, we actually doubled what the previous broker was doing, just off Easy Street leads and just building that moral, having monthly meetings, weekly meetings, inviting vendors into the office. Those are things that the previous broker division president really did not do. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Let's hope. Here we go. Don't have any issues. And I'll go in this corner. So everybody can see this? Perfect.
Yes, awesome. We've got it.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about working with investors and investing into real estate. Of course, as you start to work with investors, you always have that thing, well, at least in my back of my head, like, wow, I just made this guy, $50,000, in 3 months. I made this other person, $100,000 in a year. So, I always thought like, hey, I can do this myself as well. So I'll kind of share my story a little bit and we'll kind of go from there. So like I was telling you guys before, I'm originally from Michigan. I moved to Georgia from Michigan in 2008. I became a licensed realtor in 2009. I started working for Reed Construction Data, one of the largest publishers in the country. And basically we would call on general contractors, subcontractors, and manufacturers across the country and give them information about what is going on in their particular area. This is really a very, very strong point with my career because I got very familiar, I got very good on the phones, building that relationship, building that rapport on the phones. And Reed Construction Data really did help bridge that gap for me. In 2011, I actually started a post-construction cleanup business where I believe the first year we generated somewhere around $275,000 to $350,000. And that was literally just winging it. Didn't really know too much about the business. I talked to a lot of contractors from working with Reed, and I kind of just took a leap of faith. And before you know it, I had 20 employees working with me on my post-construction cleanup business. So right around 2013-ish, I started my real estate business, started taking off. And I noticed that with the post-construction cleanup business, I really did not have the time to do both. So I kind of let that business go. And I realized that one of my partners really could not handle that business if I was not there. So I kind of just shut that down. In 2020, I joined Easy Street Realty. I was working with the previous division manager since 2009. And every time that she would jump over to a new company, I would kind of follow suit. 2016, I received my broker's license. And in 2019, last year, I completed 5 rehab projects myself. And not only 5 rehab projects, but I probably helped at least 3 to 5 investors either get projects started or complete those projects as well. So how to find investors? A lot of people say, hey, Byron, how do you find these investors? And to be honest with you, I found my first investors through IMS. Honestly, prospecting with IMS, getting on the phone, talking to some of these leads, and they would just tell me, hey, Byron, I want to invest in this neighborhood right here. I want to invest in this other neighborhood, or what project. So my first investors came literally from Easy Street Realty High Garden, using our IMS platform. But now, because I'm a little bit more advanced, if you build a database with contractors, you do get a lot of referrals. I have received referrals from contractors, knowing that I'm a real estate broker, knowing I'm a good real estate agent in the investor realm, and they would refer me clients that they're working with on a certain projects. Attend local investor meetups. I mean, you can go to Eventbrite. There's tons of these meetups. And if you sit there and just pass out your cards, all of those investors there are either working on projects or trying to find a new project, or they may have a house that they're trying to sell, maybe a wholesaler. So I will highly suggest attending these local investor meetups. Stop by projects undergoing rehabs and pass out business cards. If I see a project that's maybe 50% complete, I may go over there, pass out my business cards, get some business cards. So it's a great way to actually spread your wings and actually build your business as well. Once again, discuss with IMS leads regarding investing in real estate. I also did this in the past, pay for advertising with Zillow and a zip code that there was a lot of rehab activity, and I was able to receive quite a bit of leads doing that as well. You'll hear a lot of investors or wholesalers will say driving for dollars, driving around neighborhoods, seeing projects that are abandoned, go back to your public records and try to find that particular seller and try to work out a deal as well.
So,
and now,
can I ask you a question right there?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're driving for dollars, what are, like, put us in the passenger seat. What are you looking for when you're driving around? What catches your eye?
Well, to me, distressed properties that are just sitting, they may have already have, for instance, one property that we actually flipped last year, we put a note on the door basically saying, hey, we see that your property is distressed. We're interested. I have a long list of buyers that are interested in your property. From there, it was a absentee owner, so she lived in New Orleans. So when she came up for July 4th, she received that note on her door and she called me. And from there, I was able to negotiate a deal and literally be the agent on that deal. In that particular deal, I ended up buying that one, and we ended up selling it probably 2 or 3 weeks after we closed.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I didn't do anything. So a lot of my strategy is not really doing a lot to these properties. I'm more of the lipstick flip type of investor for me. And a lot of my investors are lipstick flip investors, although I do have a couple that will, do the whole full rehab. But there's a lot of issues that can happen with those rehabs.
Awesome, thanks.
Now, and then also cold calling through Remind. We have a system down here. It's called Remind. It's probably going to hit across the country within the next 12 to 24 months. Remind is actually trying to take over and become like a large MLS. But with the Remind system, I'm not sure, do you guys have that in Indianapolis?
We do in Indy, yes.
Okay, so you guys can understand that you can look up pretty much all the properties on this particular street. You can see their value, you can see their credit score or rate, almost not the score, but if they're a high buy score, low buy score. So calling with Remind, and also now with Airbnb. I've had a couple people within the last about 2 months since this whole COVID has hit, and their properties are literally that they have Airbnb are just down. There's nobody going in those properties, nobody staying in those properties. They're paying on those properties. So those are ones that we can either try to sell that particular property, get them off onto something else. But cold calling with Airbnb is another hot one.
Awesome.
Okay. So there's advantages and disadvantages, of course, of working with investors. Advantages is a steady stream of income, lower marketing cost. Another advantage is learning the process. This is, I was trial and error with my investors. I'm going there as we're finding out new things about permits, as we're finding out new things with the city. I'm actually learning the process. So therefore, when I'm going back home and I'm prospecting with my leads, and I have a couple in my database on IMS, I'm able to explain that process to them. So owning certain neighborhoods. I mean, if they see your sign out there, they may give you a call. One of my properties, that I had bought probably last May. The neighbor had to sell their property, and they just actually gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'll sell this property to you for dirt cheap." So I ended up buying the property next door as well. So just owning those neighborhoods, and literally, if you're not going out there, nobody's going to know who you are. And my biggest thing is conversation pieces. Everything is a conversation piece. That's why investors, that's why prospects, that's why my clients, they feel comfortable because I'm able to provide them with a lot of relevant knowledge. And that's why, like I said, conversation pieces is a very big point of advantage of working with investors. Now, of course, the disadvantages. Some of the disadvantages are, there's a lot of offers. I mean, some of these properties that we're putting offers on may have 30 to 40 different buyers trying to get that property, especially if it's on market. Now, if it's off market, it's a little bit better, but on market, there's a lot of offers. Sometimes you're dealing with time wasters. You have to really be able to identify if this investor is serious. I mean, you can have an investor provide you with a hard money letter. You can have that investor come to your office for a nice buyer consultation. That investor still might not be serious and still may waste your time. Bad investors who do not have the credit and the capital, but keep on requesting showings. This happens to the best of us. And sometimes you have to fire your clients. You're saying, "Hey, you're not ready right now." Investors wanting you to lower your commission. I have a couple of agents that working with investors, and they're basically saying, "Hey, our previous real estate agent only charged us 1% on our side, on your side, and then 3% on the other side." And then also, of course, sometimes dangerous or unsafe environments.
Yeah, kind of digging into this a little bit. Are there two or three like questions that you ask, or how do you uncover, how do you kind of qualify? How do you uncover the serious investors from the pretenders?
Well, I have a slide on that, but I can actually go into that a little bit earlier. Basically, knowing if they have a team. If you have a team, do you have your contractors? Do you have accountants? Do you have title companies that you work with already? If you have no team, no contractors, you're not that serious, and you're looking for a lot of my resources. So therefore, I'm going to have to work triple the amount of an average investor, because now I have to actually go and pull my general contractors together, go and pull my title companies together. So if you already have a team, that's a little bit stronger for me. And also, where are you going to get your financing? Are you using an angel investor? Are you using your own cash? Are you using hard money? These are things that, a lot of people think that you can buy a property, get the rehab costs with zero down. It's not really true, especially COVID, because now a lot of these hard money companies actually are stopped lending right now. So before, usually 20% down, and they'll give you they'll give you the rehab amount as well as the amount to purchase the home. And owning your neighborhood is basically, see, here in Metro Atlanta, we have a lot of smaller neighborhoods inside of the Metro Atlanta city. So basically having your open houses there, if it's a brand new fix and flip, if it's having your signs there, having a team that's going to door knock right when you have a property that's getting ready to be ready. So that's owning that neighborhood. And then, of course, setting that comp. I have a rehab that I sold maybe 2-3 weeks ago, and that neighborhood was the highest comp. So now I know that, hey, everybody, I've pretty much made everybody money because I have the highest comp there, and it was a 3-1, which 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. You can imagine how hard it is to sell a 3-1 versus a 3-2. So now we have a lot of inventory that's popped up on the market in that particular community because of that sale that I just did a couple of weeks ago. So let's go. So different type of strategies. You have the long-term buy and hold, and I think that's with Rick, another division manager over in the Myrtle Beach. He added a nice Zoom meeting regarding the rental properties and the long-term buy and hold. Then you have the fix and flip investors, and then you have the foreign investors, and then you have the wholesalers. Typically, I don't really get too involved with wholesalers, but they have been saturating our market here in Metro Atlanta, and they kind of are preying on, I guess we would call it, people that maybe don't know their true value of their home. But we kind of stay away from that because it draw the fine line of net selling. when you're dealing with a lot of wholesalers. So long-term buy and hold investors are looking at the cap rate, and we'll discuss that a little bit down the road. They're looking for the growth and developments in the area, diversity on their investment portfolio. They're also looking for buy and hold investors to get into properties for their appreciation and potential tax write-offs or current income through rent. So maybe they have a great 401k, but they want to add a couple investment properties to it as well. So that's with your long-term buy and hold. Let's see here. That's what I already answered. Okay, fix and flip. It's the majority of the investors that I'm dealing with now are the fix and flip investors. They're looking for properties, pretty much good deals below market value. What I've learned that a lot of these below market value properties are pretty much off market. I have a lot of investors that will get a property under contract, give me a call and say, "Hey, Byron, I'll pay you to analyze this deal right here. Let me know, let me make sure these numbers make sense before I get knee deep in this project." They are looking to renovate and sell at market value or more. They're also looking to sell quickly. A lot of these hard money companies, it's a 12-month loan. Sometimes they have a 24-month loan, but they're trying to get that property, renovate that property, put it on the market, and have it sold within 7 days or less. In a wholesaler, like I said, of course, wholesale is basically just going after the seller's equity. They're putting a contract on a particular property, and then they're finding somebody to assign that contract and have a double closing. I don't really get too involved with a lot of wholesalers, but I receive tons of calls and tons of emails from wholesalers trying to sell me their properties. And of course, you have your foreign investors. Maybe about 2 years ago, I was working with an investor from China that flew over to Atlanta, and they were trying to spend somewhere around $5 million in real estate here in Metro Atlanta. But after we analyzed certain deals, and they realized they had to pay that 15% withholding, that 50% tax, they decided to kind of pull out of some of the deals. So you will see a lot of foreign investors trying to purchase properties. And also, once again, you can get the CIPS, it's a designation for real estate professionals that are trying to work with foreign buyers and sellers. So once again, the type of real estate flips, you have the full rehab, which is pretty much demoing the existing home down to the foundation and adding a brand new look. We also have the lipstick flip, which is pretty much only cosmetics. You may, take down one wall or two, but not too much. And then you have new construction. You have some people that are or some investors that are just going to take the whole house down and build it all the way up from the foundation. A little bit longer time frame when you're doing the new construction. And there's a lot of more issues that can happen when you're doing new construction. And then you have the long term, which they basically want to rehab a property. Then after they rehab that property, they'll rent that property out, and then they'll do what we call a cash out refi. So let's just say they buy a property for $100,000 and the after repair value is $300,000. What they'll do is they'll buy it for $100,000. Let's just say it's $50,000 worth of repairs. They'll add the repairs in, and then as soon as they're completed, they will either wait. And here in Georgia, we have to wait about 3 months before we can actually refinance on that property, 3 to 6 months. Or in some cases, you can refinance for exactly what you bought the property for immediately after you're done. So here's a rehab that I have currently in process right now. It's at a great location in Atlanta. I know the house looks just kind of terrible, very small. This house was a 2-1. We actually purchased this home off market for $125,000. Had a couple of delays with the city regarding the trees here in Metro Atlanta. If you cut down a tree, they will fine you up to $10,000. So we had a couple of delays there, but it's a nice 2-1. The rehab and maintenance, as far as carrying cost, is going to run us somewhere around $180,000, and we plan to list this property for $499. Most of my rehabs with this particular general contractor, they're all under contract within 7 days. So the potential profit on this deal before commissions is $195,000. So that's what it looked like before when we got the property. I went over to the house yesterday and I took some pictures. We're not completely done with the home, but you can see what we call pop the top, where we actually built 2 stories up because we could not go too far back, and it was a very narrow lot. Have all the bells and the whistles. Of course, we use our quartz, and you see we're redoing all of the bathrooms over. We project that the house will be ready within the next 30 days, and we project that even with COVID, we'll be under contract within 7 days. Okay. Here's an example of a lipstick flip. This is a lipstick flip that I did last year. Purchase price on this property was $105,000. The ARV, which is the after repair value, is $175,000, and the estimated repairs on this particular project was $15,000 to $20,000. I think we ended up spending around $18,000 or $20,000. So basically, lipstick flip, we're really just going in there, redoing the flooring, fixing the property up. Maybe adding granite countertops, putting a great look to the home, changing the carpet, or adding some luxury vinyl planks in the home, which a lot of the investors are going with now. Here's after that property, after we fixed it up right here. So the total time frame on this particular project was 45 days. From the day that we bought the project, the day that we acquired this home to the day that it closed was 45 days. The final sales price is $172,000, and the 0 seller contributions, and it was financed cash, meaning that an investor just called me and said, hey, this is a great one for my portfolio, good cap rate, we want to just buy this from you cash. And okay, so I believe I had over 10 offers within 48 hours on this particular property. So the types of financing for investors: you have private money, you have hard money, you have commercial loans, you have equity partnerships, and then seller finance. Let's see here. Sorry, every time I chat. We'll go into the cap rate. I'll explain exactly the cap rate in a second. So private money, basically, a lot of my projects, I use private money. I really didn't get into too much hard money. Private money is lenders are usually a borrowers of a family member or a friend who has the cash and is looking for either high returns on a short-term investment or income through a long-term loan. So that most of my deals are private money. A lot of my investors that I work with, they use hard money. A couple of them will use their own cash. So hard money, these private investors and investment firms typically charge 10 to 15% interest for short-term loans, a perfect scenario for an investor who plans to flip the property and can make these numbers work. Hard money lenders typically would charge 1 to 10 points, either upfront or wrapped in the loan. So, sometimes it can cost a lot for the hard money, but once again, we're looking at the ending results. Commercial loans, as a portfolio loan, commercial lenders have flexible lending requirements, but they usually come with higher interest rates, shorter term lengths, a balloon payment due in a few years. These loans are made on commercial properties and multifamily properties with more than 4 units. So a lot of the investors are looking at the quads or even these big apartment buildings will probably use the commercial loans. Equity partnerships, of course, equity partnerships, 2 or more people that share in the investment. Perhaps one will put up the cash, the other one has sweat equity. Maybe both parties will split the funding, or one will finance while the other pays the down payment. So I have a lot of my investors I work with. I see a lot of equity partnerships. One guy is the money guy. This other guy is pretty much the GC, or the one that oversees the property. And they kind of split the profit, or they work out something on the back end. And then other available financing, you will have FHA. They have some people on long term. If you can find a quad or a triplex and live in 1 unit, you can actually get an FHA loan on it. I've actually sold to a couple investors that utilize the conventional loan, of course. Portfolio loans, that's pretty much in-house with your local mortgage company. And then, of course, seller financing. Not really big right now, but I know in the past, seller financing was pretty big on investment properties. 1031 exchange. I actually did this 1031 exchange. For anybody that doesn't really know what a 1031 exchange is, basically to avoid paying your capital gains tax. If you did hold the property and find another property within 180 days, you can avoid paying the capital gains tax. So I did this twice last year. So when I get hit hard with the taxes, and I actually took advantage of a 1031 exchange. And here's the cap rate. So basically, we had a couple questions regarding the cap rate. What is the cap rate? Oh, let's go back. Sorry, trying to move this down. Let me see. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, there we go. Capitalization rate is the expected rate of return on the investment and can be calculated using the formula of NOI and divided by V, which is the value, equals your rate. So net operating income divided by your value equals the rate. The capitalization is the process of converting income to value. You'll see a lot of long-term investors try to find their capitalization rate. For example, if you have an investment property that costs $1 million and it generates $75,000 as far as net operating income a year, then it's a 7.5% cap rate. Usually the differences or the different cap rates represent different levels of risk. The lower cap rates imply lower risk, where higher cap rates imply higher risk and higher returns in some cases. So for whoever was asking regarding the cap rate. So GRM versus GIM. So GRM basically equals a price divided by gross annual rent. And these are basically terms as far as long-term investors. And the GIM is the gross income multiplier. It's a rough measure of the value of an investment property. It is calculated and divided by the property's sale price by its gross annual rental income. A gross rent multiplier is the ratio between a property's gross monthly rent and its selling price. The GRM applies to rental income only. The gross income multiplier is based on gross annual income and can include income from sources other than the rent. So basically, GRM, both of these particular scenarios you're going to use with multifamily. The GRM, maybe like a duplex, whereas the GIM, maybe if you have a 50 unit or 100 unit apartment building. Okay, so this is basically going back in the agent's role working with investors. Your agent's role, what investors like in their real estate agent. Quick property valuations. You have to be Johnny on the spot. A lot of these houses, especially if they have equity or if they're below market value, they tend to go very quick and have multiple offers. So you have to be able to do your property evaluation, do your due diligence, and get back to your investor immediately. Fast offers. You know, if an investor sends you a property and he's qualified, she's qualified, can't wait a week before you can actually turn that offer in, because that property is going to be under contract. Licensees should also pre-qualify investors by asking them about their investment goals, partnerships, and service requirements. It's very true. Areas of search, and we'll go into this in another slide, for investment properties include the MLS, Craigslist, FSBOs, foreclosures, REO listing, and database, and of course, newspapers in some cases. Investment strategies to consider when negotiating for deep discounts include paying cash, closing fast, buying as is, and waiving the inspection or appraisal. A lot of properties that we bought last year, we had to waive the inspection period. So literally I had my general contractor, or when I was showing it with my investors, their general contractor was there present, know, hey, if there's any foundation issues, any plumbing issues, if the property needs a roof. We're actually doing our scope of work as we're looking at that property the first time. When you're working with a fix and flip investor, plan a marketing strategy and get marketing vehicles prepared well in advance so you can hit the ground running when the property is ready. Fix and flip investors need to sell quickly. Once again, most of them are utilizing hard money or private money, so they want to get off of paying those high fees. A lot of buy and hold investors will be interested in renters, not buyers. You know, they want to get that property rented out as quick as possible. And a wholesaler will be more interested in immediate resale to another investor. Once again, wholesalers, there's tons in the Metro Atlanta market, and hopefully the Georgia Association of Realtors will actually do something about all of these wholesalers.
Hey, Byron, I've got a quick question, something that popped into my head. The scope of work, are you finding that most of your investors are bringing their own talent to do that, or is that a service that you need to provide?
I mean, I have a spreadsheet, and usually I provide that as well. That just shows the scope of work. It shows what items to look for and the cost factor. But a lot of, if you have a seasoned investor or an investor that knows what they're doing, they're probably going to already know how to complete their own scope of work.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking there. That may be another way to sniff out a beginning person, maybe not too serious. If they can't do a scope of work, they may not be a very experienced investor.
You're going to spend a lot of time. It's especially the investors that in our market, we have properties maybe a year or 2 years ago that were down, anywhere from 50 to 70,000 on the low end. So you'd have a lot of investors across the country that would just literally say, "Hey, I want to buy this $50,000 or $70,000 property," and it's like, "Are you spinning your wheels? Do you know what you're doing? Do what are you going to do with this property?" And then on top of that, they try to offer the property 70,000. They think they can get the property for 50,000, whereas, like I said, 2 years ago, it was still a strong seller's market. Maybe 10 years ago, they could do something like that. So let's see here. I have a couple questions.
Byron, when you have a chance, I have a question. It's Chip Hickman in Vegas.
Okay. Where can you find REO foreclosures? So there's a couple. We can find the REO auction. Hubzu has them, and the auction.com as well will have some REO and foreclosures. But typically, sometimes you can even see them on Zillow. But once again, you have to be careful because Zillow will list properties as pre-foreclosure, and literally it's just because somebody missed a payment or their payment's late. So typically, a lot of the ones that you see on Zillow that says pre-foreclosure, they'll usually come back on the market, or not say back on the market, but that particular seller will negotiate something with their mortgage company. Okay, Chip.
Yeah, first of all, great topic. I wanted to get your advice. In our market, we have a lot of trouble with the referral chain that comes from recommending a general contractor. Namely, it's always like when it rains, it pours. Whenever one is at the time when everybody else is actually using one. And we just have a reliability issue. And I was wondering, how many general contractors do you kind of keep in your pocket or in your rotation to refer to your investors? And also, what's the methodology you're using to choose those general contractors that you refer out?
It's a great question. So typically in my pocket, I'll keep maybe about 5 or 10, not too many. A lot of the general contractors that I'm using, I've actually used them in the previously, because I'm finding issues with general contractors literally just being too busy in this Metro Atlanta market. And of course, that can delay your project, which could cost you more money. So, and how I'm identifying these general contractors, a lot of them are word of mouth. I have actually found a couple good general contractors off Home Advisor. I'm not sure if you guys have that service in Las Vegas, but Home Advisor is basically just it's a website you can go to and you can see what projects contractors have actually completed, and you can get their feedback. They're actually having them vetted with background check. So sometimes I'll go on Home Advisor, and then also stopping by projects. I mean, yesterday when I was at the project in Ellaby, I saw a tile guy there, and he was doing some great tile work. And I said, "Hey, let me get your card, because I may have other investors that need tile work," as far as a subcontractor, not general contractor. So just stopping by different projects that you see a contractor there, I think there's a great way. Now, you have to be careful with contractors. I have a real estate client that was building a $2.2 million house, and during his time building this $2.2 million house, general contractor stole $250,000 from him. And also on top of the general contractor stealing $250,000 from him, he actually filed for bankruptcy. So now my particular buyer is kind of like, nothing really you can do. I mean, you just got to wait and try to take them to court. So you just have to really be careful with general contractors. Honestly, that's the hardest part of the business, your contractors. So we'll keep going. Okay, let's see here. Let me put this down so I can see. Okay. How to find potential investments for investors. Once again, we talked about driving for dollars, find properties around new plan developments. That's kind of my hit, new plan developments. I will go and find, if I hear about a big project, a big mall, I would see if there's any property around those projects or that particular project or that particular mall or that particular park. Here in Metro Atlanta, we have something that's called the Beltline, and the Beltline has actually changed real estate. To be honest with you, this Beltline, every property that you can find that's on the Beltline probably has doubled or tripled within the last 24 months. So we were really scoping out properties around the Beltline. The LOB project that I showed you guys, that was actually walking distance from the Beltline. So that was another reason why we decided to buy that property, because of how close it was to the Beltline. So look, so basically paying attention to what's in the planning phase, what is getting approved for funding will help you find potential deals as well. Wholesalers, like I said, I can show you in my email, I probably receive at least 10 to 20 emails from different wholesalers trying to sell me properties because they have a short time frame that they have to unload that property, or guess what, their contract is now void. So, establishing relationships with wholesalers, not wholesaling properties, but establishing a relationship with wholesalers, you'll be able to find potential deals for your investors as well. Establishing yourself in certain communities. If they see that you're out there and you're working on certain projects in these communities or in a certain community, I'm pretty sure if the neighbor or somebody down the street wants to sell, they may come by and get your information and let you know that they want to sell as well. For sale by owners. You can find for sale by owners, and maybe they want to sell their property pretty quick because of certain situations, very similar to absentee owners, building relationship with them. And then also build a relationship with divorce attorneys, probate attorneys, and title companies. If you have a couple probate attorneys and title companies on your belt line or in your belt, you'll actually be able to generate some good deals. And then study your numbers. That's one thing I'm pretty good at. I study the numbers. I can tell by looking at the comps, looking at the activity, looking at how much money that they've put into certain properties that are on the market and days on the market, if this is a good investment or if it's a bad investment. Okay, and here's a couple questions that if you have investors and you just want to see if they're serious, or if you have an IMS lead that's saying, hey, I want to invest into the real estate market, here's some questions that you can ask them to know if they're serious or not. Number one, what is your experience? Is this your first time doing this? Have you did it many times? What is your experience? That's a big thing. What is your end goal? Also, how are you financing your investments? What strategies do you use? Big thing. What type of investment properties are you looking for? Single family, multifamily, commercial? How much do you want to spend? Most investors will know how much they want to spend. Like I said, if an investor's coming to you and saying, hey, I want to spend $40,000 on a house, in my market right now, it really doesn't exist. So that's one that you may not want to spend so much time with, or try to convert them and push that price point up a little bit more. What neighborhoods are you buying in? Certain investors know the neighborhoods that they want to buy in. And once again, like we talked before, who's on your team? Make sure that you're just not the only person on their team. Make sure that they already have some contractors. Make sure that they already have, if they're doing a buy and hold strategy, property manager, accountants, lenders. How many offers do you plan to submit? That's a big thing as well. You don't want to have an investor that wants you to submit 20 offers a day and do that for 30 days straight, and actually goes low on every single offer. You're actually spinning your wheels, and you're never going to find that particular investor, or you may find them a particular property, but it's going to take a while. And what do you need from me? Just ask them, hey, what do you want from your real estate agent or your realtor? What do you want me to do? Most investors know what they're looking for, and they're top producing real estate agent. And then pretty much, guys, that's a picture of two investors that I sold the property to last year. And as we're at the closing table, they received their check and they were pretty happy. So that's it for my PowerPoint presentation. Now I'll open the floor, and I believe Jeff has a couple questions. So I guess I'll stop the share. There we go.
Okay, yeah. So anybody that has any questions, please chime in. I'll just chime in here real quick. I've worked with investors, like I said. I was working with investors up until about 2012, and what you just laid out here, Byron, is absolutely priceless. If you're working with investors or you want to become an investor, This is really, really great information. I appreciate you sharing this. So,
Thanks.
yeah, I mean, this is a good way to make some side income. And the main thing that I would kick in here, and I'm sure Byron does this, is qualifying. Your 10 qualifying questions. I love that. I mean, please, new agents or if you're getting into this, do that pre-qualifying. And there's a strong, when they call you and they flash all this promise to you, there's a tendency to want to get out and meet with them and start showing properties. But it is really good to get into that qualification. The question I love the most: how do you plan on buying these properties?
That's true.
And if
Yeah.
it's cash, who's your bank?
Exactly. I mean, we were working with a company here. I believe you guys have that up in Indianapolis as well, called Op City. Op City would send us so many investors, and they wouldn't be qualified. You know, they just see a house, Metro Atlanta, $50,000, $60,000, and they're calling thinking they want to buy it. They have no clue. They don't even know the lender. You know, they have just no clue. And of course, Op City would get upset if we did not take the investor out, or if we didn't update the database. So qualifying these investors is the main thing, because you will spend a lot of time if they're not ready or they're not even serious.
Byron, I have a question again. It's Chip Hickman in Las Vegas.
Hey, Chip.
Um, I'm wondering, when you go to teach, it sounds to me like you're well versed in doing this yourself. And one of the struggles I'm having is I know all this stuff, but getting it out of my head and getting it into an agent's head is a real challenge, because this is more like a college course than it is maybe, like a 5 or 10 minute explanation. So I was wondering, what practical exercises are you doing to prep the agent before they sit down and make a fool of themselves in front of a legitimate investor? Especially out here, where our first qualifying question, we're basically trying to figure out, when they say they're an investor, whether they're trying to buy a house, which doesn't require much sophistication, or if they're a multi-unit or a multi-property buyer and they have an LOI. And I was wondering, like, how much of this math do you sit down and go over with them so that they actually learn it?
I mean, for me, in my market, I have a couple of agents that I kind of will do one-on-one with. I have maybe at least 2 or 3 agents that are working on projects, that have sold projects within the last year. So you're absolutely correct. This is not something that we can talk about in 1 hour and now they're expert. You know, this is constantly meeting, constantly looking at the numbers, constantly finding out if their investor is serious. And the best way that we know if an investor's serious is actually see if they apply for a hard money loan. If they're willing to go and apply for a hard money loan, if they have no funding or no financing put in place, and if they get approved for a hard money loan, that's step 1. Step 2 is then finding the opportunity. So far as math wise, I can't sit there and say, hey, because these properties, we receive so many properties on a daily basis. I could tell you a hot property in Atlanta every single day. So that's different math every single day that I have to calculate, different numbers that I have to calculate every single day as far as these properties. So it's literally just taking the properties once they have it under contract, then kind of working the numbers and making sure it's the right opportunity for them. That answer your question, Chip? I think he's on mute. So, and like I said, with the IMS database, I'm not sure other markets across the country, but we receive a lot of leads that are relocation leads, or people that are from other states that are interested in buying property in Metro Atlanta. And honestly, within the last 2 or 3 years, I would say at least 10% of my business came from investors that were out of state. Okay, let's see here. Tony. Yes, so that's another hurdle. So we have the 90-day flip rule here in Georgia. And I believe it's probably everywhere as well. But I know here in Georgia, we have a 90-day flip rule. So what I typically do is when I put these properties on the market, I'm really looking for a cash buyer, or I'm looking for a conventional buyer. If it's a quick lipstick flip. Other flips, if I know that it's an area where the values are a little bit lower, then we will sit on the property for that 60 to 90 days just to avoid that 90-day flip rule. and then therefore we'll be able to entertain FHA offers. The property that I just sold, I think it's probably within the last 30 days, that was an FHA buyer, and we literally set on that property for 90 days because we wanted to, get past that 90-day flip rule. Because if we have all financing, we can accept all financing, of course, we have the ability to have more offers. There's a lot of FHA buyers. Any more questions?
Great topic. Great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job, Byron. We've got about 10 minutes here. One thing that popped into my head, if you're thinking about doing this yourself, it may be better to work with a couple investors, kind of watch them, learn from them. What kind of techniques would you offer for maybe a newer agent to get out there, find some investors, and just kind of learn the process from them instead of wasting their own money, see how investors do this?
Well, of course, shadowing some investors. You always can shadow investors, but for me, it literally was the numbers. I didn't really get out too much in the field. I can look at a property and see, hey, like that first property that I showed you, the lipstick flip. When I pulled all the comps in the neighborhood, I saw that the lowest comp was 165 and the highest comp was 180. So I figured, hey, even if we have to put a $20,000 rehab, we still have a lot of margin here, a lot of equity here. So therefore, for me, the biggest thing was just studying your numbers. And I think that what I see from other investors in Metro Atlanta and probably across the country, that number one, their scope is incorrect. Whereas their budget, they have 20,000, but guess what? That budget ends up being 40,000 because they don't add in certain things that, hey, you may have somebody go and steal one of your AC units, or you may have somebody vandalize your property, or you may have a contractor that quits on you in the middle of the job, and therefore now you have to pay a higher contractor. So sometimes I think with your scope, it's very important that you actually add at least 5 to 10% in there just in case something like that happens, unforeseen things. But once again, the numbers is the biggest thing for me. Also listening to a lot of podcasts. Bigger Pockets is one that I listen to all the time, and they always have certain investors on there. They interview certain people that in different strategies for if it's fix and flip, if it's a hard money company, or if it's a long-term investor. So I think knowledge would get you a long way when you're trying to buy and flip properties.
Perfect. Looks like Chris has a question.
Hey, Byron.
Hey, Chris.
That was fantastic. You knocked the ball out of the park with it. Good job.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I did have an agent come into my office not long ago, and he wanted to get into working with investors. And he said that he was on Bigger Pockets basically there's people on, I think it's Bigger Pockets. They have a website or something. And he said how he got into it was, he was just on there 3 or 4 times a day answering questions in the chat room or whatever they have on that Bigger Pockets website. And instantly he had 3 or 4 investor type people he was working with. But, like I think you mentioned this, some caution when you start working with investors. These investors want you to run comps, run the numbers every single day on multiple properties. So, and then a lot of times the properties that he was working with were the $30,000, $50,000, $60,000 properties. And you just, unless you have a couple really good investors, it's hard to make money just running around previewing houses, running the numbers, sending them all the detailed analysis on, $40,000 houses. So, but if you are interested in that game, biggerpockets.com, get on there and answer some questions for some investors, and you might be able to pick a few up.
Yeah, Bigger Pockets is good, and they also tell you who to get your hard money loans with. That's a big thing. Who's charging the lowest interest and the best hard money? Because some of these hard money companies, literally, they will slap 5-10 points on you, and that can really mess your numbers up if you're utilizing hard money. So they'll kind of give you a little bit of ins and outs, and also Facebook. Get involved in certain Facebook groups. You know, you'll have Facebook groups that are, you even see people that are trying to sell their properties on Facebook. When not sell them, but literally have a property on Facebook in mind. And if you have a strong buyers list, then you can actually push those properties to them. So,
Awesome.
but yeah.
So yeah, I'll kind of, as we're wrapping up, I want to, you know, echo what Chris was saying. Byron's making this look very easy because he's experienced and he knows what he's doing. This is not easy. It's not easy to make money doing what Byron's doing. So while we've got you here, give us a golden nugget, like one takeaway for everybody, that if they don't remember anything else, what one thing would you, what one piece of advice would you share with us before we leave?
Piece of advice that I would share, I would say, is learn your market. You know, and the reason why I say learn your market is because you would hate to sell an investor on a property that he cannot get those type of returns. So learn your market, study that market, study the numbers, and present that to him. Learning your market, knowledge is power. I actually was able to get a lot of my investors through the knowledge that I have. And I learned that knowledge, that information by going out in the community, finding certain things, and studying the MLS, looking at comps. I look at every single property under $1 million that lists on our MLS every single day. So I can see certain communities that, hey, this one's at 400,000. You know, last year it was at 300,000. You can see the values going up. And of course, if you find an area where there's a recent comp that sets the tone, and you see a property, a distressed property, now you can actually pitch that distressed property to your potential investor. So I would just say learn the areas that you want and learn your market. That is the main thing, because the numbers have to make sense. If the numbers do not make sense and that property sits on the market, they're going to blame you.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, well said. Yeah, I mean, that's about, I don't have anything to add. If anybody has any questions, please feel free. So this was really good information. I appreciate it, Byron.
And
I know everybody did.
If you guys have any questions, or you just want to reach out to me, my phone is always open. My email is always open. You can send me an email. You can give me a call. I'll be glad to share some more information with you guys. So just, you know, reach out to me. I'm always available.